video, I'm going to introduce you to the concept of a triad. We're going to define what a triad is, and we're going to look at how they are constructed, how they are made up, and how to write them out. So, a triad is a form of chord. We use chords in music to create harmony. Essentially what we're doing is simultaneously sounding multiple notes. And we've already learned that you can have a harmonic interval when you have two notes that are sounded. What happens if you add a third note or a fourth note? Well, indeed, you start to create chords. And a particular unique type of chord is called the triad. Now, like scales, there are some very clear definitions for the types of triad that you can use in Western music. And that's what we're going to look at today. What are the types of triad? How are they constructed? Why are they called triads? And just kind of get familiar with them and get to know how they are defined and how to write them out or identify them if you come across them. So, what are triads? Well, as I've said, they are a chord. They are specifically a three-note chord, and that is important. Triads are a three-note chord. Now, there are many three-note chords, but there are only a few triads, because there are some other criteria that need to be in place for a three-note chord to become a triad. So, one of the other elements is that all notes are a third, that's to say the interval distance, apart. All the notes of the triad are a third apart. Now we will see that they are not always presented, they are not always written a third apart, but there is always a way that they could be grouped together so that all the notes are a third apart. So, the two things that we need to bear in mind for a chord to be a triad is that it is a three-note chord and that all the notes are a third apart. Now let's look at an example of one. As soon as I put one up, you will say to yourself, oh right, I see what you're getting at, okay? So here we go. Here's a triad. Now, that makes sense, right? There are three notes in the chord. They are a third apart. This is a third, and this is a third, right? Now, you could say to me, but hang on a minute. What if I wrote it? It's the same three notes, but I wrote A and C and F like that. Would that be a triad? Well, it would be. It would be a triad, but it would not be being presented in its most closed, its closest, what we would call triadic structure. It's being presented in another structure that indeed we will get to in the next video. But for now, we're not worried about this. We acknowledge that these three notes could be written in different ways. We'll get to that in a moment. We understand that, but we're not concerned with that at the moment. We are concerned only with when those notes, the same three notes, are written in what is called triadic structure. That is to say, when the notes are indeed a third apart from one another. That is what we're concerned about right now. When that happens, we can observe that there is an interval, as we've said, a third, but a particular type of third that occurs between the bottom two notes and then between the top two notes, the middle note and the top note. We could say to ourselves, well, F to A is indeed a type of third, and A to C is a type of third. And what we're going to discover is that the names for triads are a combination, result from, the specific type of triad results from the combination of thirds that it has contained within it. I'll say that again. The name and the type of triad is a result of the combination of the type of thirds that are contained within it. Let me show you on this particular triad. So, what type of third is F to A? Well, hopefully you're becoming good enough now with intervals and with identifying intervals that you don't have to spend a long time figuring this out. And I'm just going to give it to you, but you do need to be fluent on figuring out different types of intervals so that you can identify these quickly. But the interval between F and A is a major third, all right? You could write it here. Now, That's great. So the interval between the bottom two notes of the triad is a major third. The interval between the top two notes of the triad is A to C, and that is a minor third. So the top interval is a minor third. This is the bottom interval. This is the top interval. When you have a combination that is a major third on the bottom and a minor third on the top, when you have that combination, then you call the whole triad major. Let me say that again. When you have a combination of a major third on the bottom and a minor third on the top, the whole triad is called major. Now, it's fairly obvious that that's not the only type of triad that you can have. What if instead I write this out? Seemingly the same three notes, slight adjustment. Right? This time I have F, A flat, C. It's still a triad because it has three notes and they're all a third apart from one another. It's got all the characteristics of a triad. But it's probably not a major triad because I've messed with it. And so we know something's up. So what is it instead? Well, we look for what are the combinations, what are the types of intervals involved. What is this interval? And then what is this interval? And this time we would observe that the lower interval is a minor third. And we would observe that the top interval is a major third. So this time we have the opposite of what we had before, a minor third on the bottom, a major third on the top. That particular triad, where you have that combination of thirds, is called a minor triad. So far we've come across two types of triad, the minor triad and the major triad. And they are specifically a result of the different types of thirds that are in combination with one another. Let's go on, because there's actually two more that we could encounter. What if we look at this interval? Or this triad, these intervals that create a triad. Again, everything is in place for this to be a triad. It has three notes, they are a third apart from one another. However, when we get into the details, we realize that this time we have a major third on the bottom, and in fact, also a major third on the top. So we have two major thirds. That creates what we call an augmented triad. So we have encountered three different types of triad, the major triad, the minor triad, and now the augmented triad. It's all to do with the combination of major and minor thirds that we have when we analyze the makeup of the triad. Let's look at the last one, and I think by now you've probably predicted where we're going, all right? We've got a major third and a minor third and a major third, two major thirds. What do you think the last one is? Probably two minor thirds, and indeed it is. So if we were instead now to look at the same starting point, but to realize that we have these accidentals creating a minor third here and another minor third here. Those two minor thirds give us a diminished triad. So to finish our chart over here, minor third and minor third creates a diminished triad. So there are four types of triad. First of all, they are three-note chord. All the notes are a third apart from each other. Those are the two important characteristics. Then you say to yourself, what type of third do I have on the bottom? What type of third do I have on the top? And depending on the combination, you can have a major, a minor, an augmented, or a diminished triad. Those are the four types of triad. Now, The other thing that we should bear in mind is that we do generally refer to the members of the triad with some specific terms, just again, as a matter of knowing how to communicate to one another. So we talk about the bottom note as the root, then we talk about the note that is a third above the root as the third of the triad, and the top note, which is a fifth above the root, as the fifth of the triad. So, the combination of thirds is what gives you the name, but we refer to the three members of the triad as root, third, and fifth to do with their interval distance above the starting note, the root note of the triad. All right? So, root, third, and fifth. So, if I say to you, what is the root of a C major triad, it's very obviously C. C is root. And it remains the root even if we rewrite it in different configurations. This is always the root, this is always a third, this is always a fifth, regardless of how we write it. However, today, on this video, we're concerning ourselves with triadic structure, so everything is written root, third, fifth, which is how we would kind of expect it. So, in review, we have the root, third, and fifth of the triad, which in combination and presented as a triadic structure creates two types of third. Depending on the combination of those thirds, whether it is major minor, minor major, major major, or minor minor, depending on that combination, that can give us either a major, a minor, augmented, or a diminished triad. And when we have those triads, we then know what sound world to expect, and it also helps us when it comes to combining triads together to create what we'll learn down the road is a progression of triads or a chord sequence when you have more than one chord in succession. Make sure that you understand these concepts. You've got this down. We're going to take it up a notch in the next video. Thanks very much.